This video will be a quick dive into different Star Citizen controller setups. One of the challenges with Star Citizen for new players are the controllers. Do you need a $1,000 joystick setup, or can you get started with something less complex? What options there actually are? And then there are the acronyms like HOTAS, HOSAS, HOMAS, HOTAS. Okay, I made this one up. I do have some experience with playing around with Star Citizen and controller setups. In this video, I will go through some basic different setups for Star Citizen and give you a few thoughts regarding them to get you started. Some of this information is based on my own experiences and some on discussions in the community. I hope you'll find this information useful. Also, let me know in the comments that what sort of setup you're flying with or would like to fly. And if you're new to Star Citizen, don't forget to use a referral code when registering for the game to get some extra credit, and during larger events, perhaps some other bonuses. Naturally, use your friends if someone referred you, and if not, you can use mine if you find this guide useful. It's in the description. Before getting into details, there are a few things you should know about Star Citizen and controllers. First, you still need a way to control your character on foot, so basically a FPS setup. Usually mouse and keyboard, but you can also move around with the controller. 2. Star Citizen's flight model is, let's say, semi-Newtonian. This means that beyond the basic flight simulator axes like pitch, yaw and roll, you can also move back and forward, left and right, and up and down. These extra axes can be mapped into your controllers. There are basically two flight models. Coupled, that simulates flying in atmosphere but in space. Thrusters try to keep you moving to a direction where you are looking or stop you automatically. And decoupled, where thrusters are not used automatically and you keep moving with unchanged speed until your next inputs. 3. Star Citizen has lots of keybinds. You need to learn the keybinds or use extra buttons. It's not easy in space, but still. And 4. Star Citizen is still work in progress. Support for controllers isn't perfect, and some rare controllers might not even work without third-party software like Joystick Gremlin. If you run into this issue, I have a separate guide about Joystick Gremlin, link in the description. First, let's start with basic mouse and keyboard. It's something you usually still need to keep at hand while playing Star Citizen in any case. Good thing is that it's perfectly viable setup, and CIG, the company making the game, clearly tries to make sure that you don't need expensive setups to fully enjoy the game. There are some really good pilots flying with mouse and keyboard, and lots of people who could kick my ass in one-to-one dogfight. While I've been building my setup, they have been practicing. Your setup doesn't make you a good player, your skills make. If you're using keyboard for strafing, your controls are digital, so you have full thruster power available at the press of a key. On the other hand, since it's digital, you won't have the granular controls of an analog axis. But the biggest drawback for me is immersion, or just fun. I couldn't imagine myself flying any plane in aerospace without a joystick, but still, completely viable option. And also, adding pedals to mouse and keyboard setup can increase its effectiveness. Another device people quite often have is a gamepad. It has more analog axis for flight and naturally can give you more relaxed gaming position. Star Citizen actually has some basic gamepad bindings ready, and CIG recently confirmed that these are being overhauled for Squadron 42. So it would seem that they are taking this one seriously too. PS5 controller requires the software like DS for Windows, but based on my understanding, Xbox controller should work as is. One of the biggest drawbacks of a gamepad is that the amount of buttons is limited compared to keybind Star Citizen has. So you'll probably want to keep your keyboard close to you in any case. Not an option I would personally recommend, but on the other hand, if it's your preferred controller option, you should be good, at least for PvE. Okay, let's go forward with the flight experience and add an extra joystick. This one is Logitech Extreme 3D Pro. Not a good one, but I think I paid 15 euros for this as second-hand when I wanted to get something for my 6-year-old son to get him started with flight sims. This can get you started if you're on the fence about getting better controllers. This one has few good qualities. The twist axis, analog lever, and some extra buttons. Especially if you have a Z-axis or twist axis, you can control your heading, meaning pitch and yaw with the joystick, and roll with the twist axis, and use your throttle level to control your speed. Single joystick probably doesn't have enough buttons, so you need to keep your keyboard at hand while flying. Also, you're still missing axis for strafing, but you can play the game with a single joystick, at least with PvE again. Now let's get into the acronyms. HOSAS means hands on stick and mouse. This can be really competitive setup, since especially dogfighting in PvP is a lot about aiming. If you have either ambidextrous joystick or left-hand joystick, which this naturally isn't, you can use that one for movement and mouse for aiming. Add some pedals and you have a really competitive setup for PvP. Next one is the basic flight sim setup, HOTAS, aka hands on throttle and stick. Compared to a single joystick with a throttle lever, this basically adds more buttons to your setup and allows a bit finer controls for your thrusters. And a real throttle is much more fun than a small lever. There are lots of people who prefer this setup, and if you're not aiming to become a top PvPer, it should be good enough. Many throttles even have an analogous stick for them that you can use for strafing. Good option, especially for flying larger ships. In general, you can bind either speed limiter to your throttle axis and use cruise control to move around, or bind thrusters forward to the throttle axis. Latter is what I use with my throttle. There's also binding for switching thrusters from backward to forward thrusters and vice versa. Naturally, this setup doesn't give you as good control for all your thrusters for strafing as a joystick for your left hand would give. And especially if you're flying in decoupled mode, you usually want to be able to control your thrusters easily for both forward and backwards, which can be at least challenging with a throttle. And this leads us into what has become the standard for space sim during last years, HOSAS, aka hands on stick and stick, or to put it simply, two joysticks. While you're perfectly fine enjoying the game with setup like HOTAS, if you're buying a setup just for space sims or are just a competitive player interested in PvP, go with HOSAS. Especially if you have twist axis on your joysticks, you can use two joysticks to control all the axes you have, pitch, yaw and roll, and all the movement directions, basically 60 degrees of freedom. Personally though, I hate twisting my wrist sideways, so I have locked that axis on my right stick and use pedals. Simplest way to utilize HOSAS setup is to bind movement to the left joystick and heading controls to the right, though there are some other variations that some competitive PvPers use, especially if you bind thrusters to pedals. With HOSAS setups, you quite often see that the left joystick is angled. In my case, I use the twist axis of my left joystick for up and down strafing, so just feels more natural. More like throttle, but with all axes. It's called Z adapter in verbal lineup and Omni throttle in VKPs. And if you can decide between HOSAS and HOTAS, just get both. Let's call it HOTAS. I use my left joystick for combat and other situations where I need final controls, and throttle when moving longer distances. Throttle might become more useful in the future after atmospheric flight changes are implemented, but this is just speculation at the moment. And if you're interested in my controller setup details, I have also a video about that. Next, let's take a look at few joysticks available. For getting started with just basic joystick or HOTAS, probably anything will do. For example, Trustmaster and Logitech are some well-known manufacturers and make okay consumer-grade products. Not good, not particularly durable, nor easy to repair. But you can play the game with them, and at least I'd rather play with them than without any controller, at least myself. Just realize that if you really like the gameplay with your controllers, you might end up wanting to upgrade your setup. And if you use HOTAS setup, you might find yourself craving for a second joystick. But still, I want to emphasize, there are experienced players who still keep playing with mouse and keyboard, so it's not mandatory. But if you're interested in getting a HOSAS setup, you'll need a left-handed joystick. There are few manufacturers who actually make them, and for entry-level setup, something like Trustmaster T16000M can be configured for both hands and is even sold as a dual pack. Some people complain about the quality and have had issues especially with the twist axis though. Current gold setup and probably the most sensible choice regarding bang for the buck seems to be VKB Gladiator series, current model being Evo. This is regarded as more high quality product than your normal manufacturers, comes with left and right versions of the grip and also has the optional angled adapter. And VKB also sells models for the series. Throttle Beats also offers an ambidextrous Velocity 1 joystick around the same price point that should also be a good option with buttons and extra levers. But it doesn't have the angled adapter or any models available. For the more premium options, you usually buy the base and joystick separately, and there are different options for both. For Space Sims, two brands are often mentioned, Whirlpool, that I use myself, and VKB's Gunfighter series. Excellent choices both, but rather expensive. These high-end joysticks come with several benefits. First of all, usually more accurate and just, let's say, better feeling. I used to have Logitech X56, and while the throttle was quite okay, the single spring centering the joystick had was just nowhere close to my Whirlpool joysticks. 2. Better configurability, like how much force you need to use with axes, with custom springs and cams, or in some later cases just with adjusting a screw. And 3. Higher quality and often metal insides that you can repair. You can easily dismantle the joystick and change the broken part that the manufacturers also sell to you. These are built to be repaired. Also, Windwing might be a familiar manufacturer for flight simulators and builds good HOTAS setups. I use them with my DCS setup, but no left-handed joystick there. Thrustmaster Warthog is naturally popular with flight simulators, but I wouldn't pick it up just for space sims, unless you really need it for specific flight sim or already have it. Once you have picked up your joystick, what's next? Some joysticks were well on the table, but even with those, it's not really ergonomically optimal. Some are actually designed to be mounted on a stand. Easiest option would be getting desk mounts or chair mounts, like Whirlpool and VKB offer their own mounts, and there are also companies like Monster Tech or Fox Mount, for example, that offer aluminium mounts. Or you can make your own ones. First ones I made from plywood, and second ones from aluminium rails. There are also companies that offer full cockpit setups. For example, Next Level Racing sent me their Flight Setup Pro a while ago for testing, and I'm still using the chair in my setup. And naturally, you can always build your own setup. There's a lot of build videos and other videos of my setup on this channel, and plans for mine are available for free to download. Links in the description. Next up, pedals. They are not really a controller setup itself, but they add an extra axis to your setup, or 3 if you have toe brakes. Like I mentioned, I prefer using them over the twist axis on my right hand joystick. Also, I have a yaw on the pedals, which isn't the most optimal for space sims, but something I enjoy the most. But the nice thing with the pedals is that they can be a great addition to any setup. For example, you can bind roll to them for mouse and keyboard or HOSAS setups. There are many flight simulator options available from the manufacturers previously mentioned, but one interesting trend is to use racing pedals and actually bind your forward and backwards thrusters into them. If you're going with the flight pedals, figure out if you want an open or closed hill version, or get one that can be configured to both. I really hated the closed hill setup myself, so I'm using Thrustmaster TPRs, but your taste might differ. Beyond the basic controller setups, you might want to supplement your setup with some extra buttons. As I've mentioned before, Star Citizen comes with lots of keybinds, and using these instead of your keyboard makes the experience more fun, but this is completely optional. There are a few options to choose from. If you have a tablet or even a phone available, you can use that as your game controller. There are apps that turn your touch device into a game controller. Just install the software on your PC and download the app into your device. The biggest benefit of this is that you can easily use different layouts in different situations and don't have to memorize the keybinds. I'm using Game Class myself, which has basically lots of ready-made layouts or shards for Star Citizen, and it also allows you to design your own layouts pretty easily. There's also an affiliate link in the description if you want to try it out, and also a code to get you 5% off for your first purchase. but there are other options too, like Gamepad controller and more generic apps. And there are also commercially available button boxes. I have verbal control panels number 1 and number 2 as part of my setup. Also, VKB has some available as part of their Gladiator Evo series. Quite a few people also use Stream Decks as game controllers, thanks to their versatility. There are also StarCitizen specific icon packs available for them. And you can always build your own button box or panel yourself, like I have done with some of my custom panels. You just need a board that is recognized by a PC as a controller. I'm using Leo Bodnar BBI64 myself, though the cheapest option would be using an Arduino clone with the joystick library. Another interesting addition are the head trackers. These basically track your head and allow you to look at different directions. I'm using Tobii Eye Tracker 5 myself. As the name implies, it can also track your eyes, at least on smaller displays than I have. Just add the sensor below your display and you're good to go. Track IR is perhaps just a bit more responsive, but requires attaching an extra clip to your headset. Also, I'm in Tobii's affiliate program, so if you're interested in getting one, check the link in the description and get a small discount with my code. These affiliate links help me and help the channel, but don't cost you anything. Okay, so this has been a quick overview of different controller setups for playing Star Citizen. Good thing with the game is that CIG tries to keep the game accessible for different setups, so unless you're aiming to become a top PvPer, you're perfectly fine with a setup you have and access to, or just feel like it's the most fun for you. Latter being my case, I'm not trying to optimize my setup for PvP, I'm not good at it. Once you get familiar with the game, you can start supplementing your setup with extra stuff. Also, thanks to few people in our org, Marskin Nyrki, for helping with this guide. If you happen to be a Finnish speaker and looking for an active org, check it out. I really hope this guide has been useful for you, and don't forget to like and subscribe, it helps the channel a lot. But thanks for watching and hope to see you next time.